It's March 3rd, and welcome back to the Squashcast. I'm your host, Rob Beaumont, joined once again by Jesse Engelbrecht.
How's it, everyone? Yeah, geez, where to start, eh? Just that Chicago Open, what a tournament. So we're going to look and dissect that a little bit more, the men's and women's. Just an absolutely brilliant tournament. I'd probably say one of the best tournaments of the season so far, you know, in regard to upsets galore, the quality of the squash on offer, the drama that was out there, broken noses, brothers beating brothers, and just like the brutality of some of the matches, just the physical presence that was on there. So yeah, it almost feels like this was a tournament culminating in a lot of hard work for a lot of players, you know, kind of getting towards the end of the season. So yeah, really looking forward and interesting to see, dissect this tournament and then seeing what's coming up after that.
Yep, the Windy City Open, one of the great venues of the tour. A few players enjoy this one in Chicago with the church background with all the crests up on the wall and the stained glass window that you can see from all the footage that we see online.
Yeah, great venue. Up there rivaling, you know, TOC and the Alguna with quality. What was a bit disappointing again as well, like by, you know, quarters, semis, and even the finals, I think there was a few seats, ones that were directly behind the back of the glass, which was disappointing to see with such a prestigious tournament in what you'd think would be an easily accessible site.
Yeah, and we see that all too often in squash tournaments with prime seating positions getting not used to their full potential. With, you know, you could throw in a couple of schools from the local area just to get a bit of exposure. I know they do that with the British Open up in Hull, coming up next month as well. So we'll jump into the men's and go straight to round one because, as Jesse said, this was an absolute upset galore tournament. Looking at round one, I'm just going to pick out immediately that Mohammed versus Paul Cole. Mohammed did go 2-love up, but Paul managed to bring it back to 2-all and then take a 3-love lead in the fifth. And at that point, I think many people thought that it could easily go his way.
Yeah, you know, Paul Cole riding on this wave of confidence that he's got at the moment, a 94-minute match, first round for Mohammed Al-Shorbagy. I bet both players were a bit gutted when they saw that draw come out. You know, the number one seed Mohammed playing kind of the player who's got the biggest wind in his sails with Paul Cole. So yeah, interesting to see Paul Cole fighting back from 2-love. And Mohammed has that little bit of tendency to lose a bit of concentration now and then. You know, maybe he thought the hard work had been done and he could just sit back a bit. But, you know, credit to Paul, he's becoming pretty known as one of the toughest players out there, and, you know, but likened to a young Nick Matthews. So hopefully that's a sign of respect to both Nick and Paul in that regard.
Yeah, I can really see that comparison with the Wolf, Superman being quite a powerful kind of stature as well. We've also got in the first round with Steve Coppinger versus Cameron Pilley. Now, you said before we started recording these guys are pretty good friends, but there was a bit of an incident at 1-all.
Yeah, I believe Coppinger broke Pilley's nose purely by accident. I had a brief chat with Cops about it. Nothing obviously intentional, and saw a bit of Cam Pilley's Twitter feed, you know, kind of explaining it a little bit more, where he had to go pretty much put his nose back into place. It sounded a bit gruesome, and you see Cameron sitting there with a bloody towel and sitting on the chair. So yeah, I think that happened in the third game. So it was 1-all, and it maybe sounded like, according to Cameron, he was gaining some momentum and felt he could have won that. But, you know, massive credit to Cops beating Cam 119 minutes. Okay, I think they'd taken into account the blood injury there, but, you know, Cops has got back into the top 20 in the world now and is looking on pretty good form. And again, probably a pretty tough round for both players. They probably would have both looked at that and been, oh, okay, right, here we go now. There was maybe a few more easier draws both players could have got.
Yeah, and as I've said many times on the podcast, I do enjoy sort of the taller players battling each other, because you just see a chess match between them purely for control of that central T area. We're also going to pick out Diego Elias taking out Ryan Cascali 3-love. Ryan coming off that win recently. Where was that?
Can't quite recall. I remember Ryan had a great end to the season. I think he had obviously a good few wins leading up to this. But yeah, that one kind of just went under the radar a little bit. You know, Diego, who I tipped for some big things at the end of last season, yeah, kind of look pretty confident there. You know, beating Cascali 3-love, relatively long match, but yeah, credit to Diego. Moving on to another match which caught my interest was James Willstrop beating Omar Mossad 3-love in 34 minutes. pretty convincing, that one. And again, James has got that wind in his sails again. I think he's up to number 7 in the rankings this month. We'll check that and report on that. But I think there was something on Twitter talking about how, I think this was his highest ranking since 2014. So credit to someone like James, who's in the autumn of his career, so to speak, being able to kind of get back to number 7 in the world and looking pretty solid. And just another one of that first round. Again, there's so many amazing first round matches. Qualifier Leo Au beating the 7th seed Tarek Momin in the first round, which again pretty big upset for the young lad beating Tarek, because Tarek looked like he was getting onto some form again. So be interesting to see how Tarek kind of deals with that and moves on.
Yeah, an interesting one, because Tarek has been quite well in form recently, getting to the final of Channel VAS back in December. We'll move on now to round 2. Obviously, with fewer matches, there are fewer opportunities for some upsets. But we did see Simon Rosner taking out Ramy Ashour, Ramy's first tournament back for a few weeks. And I think I literally said it in the last episode that Simon seems to be the guy to take it to the big top players.
Yeah, great win for Simon to be able to get one over Ramy, especially the way Ramy won his first match. He just looked imperious. I think the amount of cross-court nicks he was putting against Ollie Tuominen, 23-minute match, Ramy won that. And then, Simon took him out, I'd say, relatively comfortably, a 3-1. And, great credit for Simon to win that one, taking out one of the highest seeds. But then that kind of argument is, like we've talked about Simon for a while, like he couldn't quite then follow it up in the next round. Had Ali Farag next round, and that's one, if you beat Ramy, you'd kind of hope you'd be able to back that up and double up your points and be able to kind of see that through. So interesting to see where Ramy goes. First tournament back, so not expecting much, but in the past, Ramy's had that first tournament back and pretty much got to the final and won it a few times. So this was a little bit of an upset in that sense. So we'll see how he kind of gathers himself for the next few big things coming up.
Yeah, no obvious injuries for Ramy there, but he didn't seem particularly comfortable throughout that game. We're going to pick out 2 other matches from round 2 with Marwan El-Shorbagy versus Steve Coppinger. That was Steve's last game, with Marwan taking it 3-2. It's quite a tough game for Steve to take on a really in-form Marwan. We've also got Fares Dasuki versus Kareem Gowad. The only reason I picked this out is because it was fantastic. Gowad took it, which you would probably expect, but the two of them played it with such tenacity throughout, really picking up astonishing balls, and I really recommend anyone going and finding either the full match on Squash TV or just the highlights on YouTube.
Yeah, no, really exciting to see it when two Egyptians come across each other. You know you're in for a treat, and the style of the game is so open. They're taking so many more risks, both with their shot selection and with their movement patterns, and it's just great to see that court opening up and almost the randomness of the modern game, I kind of like to call it. So yeah, great match, that one. And one that I watched closely was like Rob just mentioned, Steve Coppinger versus Marwan. Steve had a couple of chances to go 2-1 up. I think it was 1-all 10-7, and he squandered a few of them, which could have ultimately cost him the match, because he ended up losing a very tight 3-2 to Marwan, and that would have been like a nice double breakthrough for Steve to be able to beat Pili in the first match and then back it up with Marwan. And as we saw, Marwan going on to beat, I see Rob here's just got some highlights up, so he's making sure that he's on task. But because obviously when Cops lost to Marwan, and then Marwan, the upset of the tournament, going on to beat his brother Muhammad, that was an absolutely, rip roar of a match, and just great to see the way it ended, in the sense when Marwan won, he pretty much burst out crying. He just couldn't hold his emotions. It's probably been so long coming that he hasn't beaten his brother and been in the shadow, and he probably gets reminded of that pretty constantly at his university, and wherever he goes, he's known as the other Shorbagy. So you could see the outpouring of emotion, and Muhammad was so nice, kind of big hug and almost letting him cry on his shoulder, the older brother letting the younger brother cry on his shoulder. I thought that was really sweet. And yeah, interesting to see where the rankings are going to be now, because this tournament had so many upsets, and I think it's up for the taking who's going to be world number 1 at the end of the season.
Yeah, that match was a really exciting one. It was actually at a time where I could watch the whole thing with I think I came in at a few points into the second game, and I wasn't too impressed, to be honest, in the second and third. It was a little dull with a lot of line and length, but these two know each other so well, being brothers, But it really hotted up in the fourth and fifth, with quite a few little, itty bitty things with the ref. Mohamed had to change his shoes, and Marwan is complaining that he's taking too long. I mean, how long does it take to change a pair of shoes? And you can easily see on the video that he's taking a drink and he's taking his time. He's changing orthotics and all this. So there's going to be a little bit of contention. And then as soon as Marwan breaks down into tears, it's all gone. It's all in the past.
Well, it sounds like Mohamed learned very quickly from what Greg Gaultier did to him quite previously, taking that long-ish injury break, but then getting a bit of refreshment. And you could maybe just call that experience, but, I think no harm, no foul happened there. Another interesting match in that round, go back a step. The Daryl Selby, Greg Gaultier was set to be quite an interesting kind of matchup, but believe Daryl caught a virus pretty soon before and just could hardly even kind of stand upright, and I think it was over in about 16-17 minutes. And shame poor Daryl got a bit of a bashing on some social media areas, so I feel sorry for him, because I think that was a little bit uncalled for from some people, but Daryl handled it well, as he always does, and I'm sure he'll come back fighting pretty soon.
Yeah, he's a proper Essex boy. I don't think he's going to let that get to him.
Yeah, sure. And then one of the final matches, which was the big upset as well, was the Spaniard Borja Golan, kind of getting, again, towards the end of his career, 33-year-old, beating the world champion, Garwad, 3-1, which the second tournament in a row, Garwad's lost unexpectedly a little bit early on. And yeah, I don't think it's the case, could be, but have people worked him out? Is he maybe kind of feeling a little bit of the pressure on his shoulders now? I think we discussed that as soon as he won the World Open, how he's going to kind of handle that pressure, and he did fantastic his first couple of tournaments after that. But yeah, maybe just that bit of edge is gone from him, whether it's is he thinking about things too much? Are the other players adapting the game to him? Really interesting to see. But yeah, huge win for Borja, and that's going to mean a hell of a lot to him.
Yeah, it seemed like in the game that Golan really using his just pure stamina to keep the rallies going long. Almost seemed to frustrate Garwad a little bit. You don't really see it in many of the games, because he does seem so dominant. Borja coming back from that back injury from last year, so a really good way to bounce back.
Yeah, I just think Borja's style, he's got this ridiculously good hold. It's probably one of the best holds in the game. He unlucky enough to train and play with him when he was younger, and it just was horrible to kind of be on the end of every single rally. You're either stopping or starting, and then at odd moments he'll then whip in this little boast or get on the ball early and smack it. But technically, I think he was able to disrupt Garwad's game, so maybe it was the style that Garwad wasn't quite comfortable with. So yeah, it's interesting to see if people are going to look at that and maybe try use more of that tactic against Garwad moving forward. Just one thing to mention before we dissect the semi-finals, which again brilliant from Chicago Squash, was the equal prize money for the men and women, which is great to see. It looks like more and more tournaments are embracing this. And then secondly, being quite a big kind of shout about it on Twitter, was the $500,000 event next year for men and women. So man, that's huge. You could see all the players were really appreciative of it. They were really talking positively about that next season. So credit to the guys over at the Windy City Open to be able to get that sponsorship and share it equally.
Yeah, and they announced that just after the final as well, which a bit of a surprise considering the amount of money available next year for the prize money. It's going to be interesting to see how many we get, because I think we had a few people drop out of the tournament this year. Maybe people will take a bit more of a risk next year if they've got little injuries and just want to go for that big payday, hopefully. So yeah, we'll move on to the semi-finals, and at this point it was we had Marwan, Ali Farag, Greg Gaultier, and Borja Golan left. I think I spoke to you before the semis, and we were worried about the Squashcast curse, because we almost expected Greg to make the final at this point, and that really was how it ended up.
Yeah, geez, for once, I didn't put the hex on my prediction. I predicted as soon as we saw the semis. Yeah, for me, Craig stood out pretty quickly that he was going to win that semi, and I tipped him for the tournament, which he eventually went on and won. But yeah, looking at the semis, the bottom half, the 3 seed in, 2 seed got knocked out, and the top half, the number 5 and 6 seed. So yeah, kind of again upsets galore and seeds tumbling. great for the spectator aspect and just to see how those world rankings are going to be kind of shuffled around a little bit soon. Just looking a little bit more in detail in the first semi-final with Marwan versus Ali Farag. Marwan was very clinical at the end of the first and the second. It was quite nip and tuck, but Marwan would get a little half chance and just pounce on it and just be absolutely ruthless with his shots. So I thought that was really kind of good for him. In the third game, I saw Farag had a massive momentum, and just as he had these brilliant skills in the third game, like trickle boast and just using that kind of almost awkward languid style of his. He's such a skinny bloke, Ali Farag, and he just kind of used it really well to kind of get under the skin of Marwan. But Marwan was then able to kind of gather it together and win a pretty tight 11-9 in the fourth. But I think after those first two games, because Ali Farag didn't get any of those first two, momentum was always going to be on Marwan's side. Look, Ali did as good as he could to stem that tide, but once you're 2-love down against someone of Marwan who's just come off the back of beating his brother, it's going to be pretty hard to turn around. So yeah, credit for Marwan for battening down the hatches and getting that fourth game under his belt.
Yeah, a clash of very similar frames of player. They're both quite wiry. In commentary, we heard that at school, Marwan was actually the British national cross-country champion, which obviously completely different sports, but really held him instead against his top-level players playing, throughout. He's not played a match except for the first round under 60 minutes. So clearly that's helped him along the way. With the other semi-finals, Greg versus Borja, Golan got one game. But ultimately, it was Greg's all along.
So you got Borja basically had 2 game balls in the second to take it to 1-1, and did this, ultimately cost him the match, which you could kind of see he really needed to get that second game. Borja, he just tensed up a little bit at the end. Greg hit a couple of ridiculously good shots, but Greg ended up winning that game 16-14, I think, that second one. But yeah, Borja kind of squandering two game balls, and there was some seriously big celebrations from Greg at the end of the second. It was a 30-minute game, the end of the second, and Greg pulling out his trademark chin and hip thrusts for the crowd. Crowd favorite there. Well, maybe my favorite, not crowd favorite, but you could see how much that meant to Greg to win that second against Borja, because he could probably really feel the momentum shift could have gone towards Borja on the back of a good bit of win the round before and a good bit of confidence. So yeah, credit to it, and then Greg was able to kind of see it out after that.
Yeah, sorry, correction there. He didn't manage to get a game. I was looking at the wrong match there. But yeah, 15-13 in that second game. So a 3-love, but 69 minutes in total makes that quite a challenging match for Greg to recover from, and then push on to play Marwan in the final. And when we look at the final, from watching the match, it seemed that Marwan was always in it. But if you look at the scoreline, it almost tells a different story.
Yeah, I think Marwan was probably quite a bit jaded. I think Greg talked about it in his post-match interview, where Marwan came to a much tougher draw, having to beat his brother, and the amount of squash in his legs was massive compared to Greg. Marwan came flying out the blocks in that first game. He kind of just got Greg on and off the court pretty quick, and you kind of thought, well, he needed that, Marwan, definitely to kind of have a chance of winning. And he kind of thought, oh, well, is Greg going to come to the party here? But Greg kind of knows what to do, and was able to kind of stem that flow. A pretty tight second game with Greg taking 11-8. But then this is where I think the match kind of really got lost for Marwan, where Greg took a 6-love lead in the third, and you just can't allow that. 1-1, 6-love down. Yeah, he pretty much not going to win that, and Greg won that game 11-2. And yeah, Marwan definitely looked jaded, almost like no interest. Maybe that's a harsh way to do it, but you could see, like, in some of his lunges, he wasn't even kind of popping out his lunges. He was letting his body weight collapse through the lunge a little bit, and then all his movement patterns were pretty much compromised. And again, that's where the match was lost. The last game was 11-4 to Greg, and yeah, a shame, because it was building up to be a really interesting final because of what had happened previously, all the seeds getting scattered. But that's sometimes what happens, when those seeds get scattered and there's a big excitement early on. By the time it gets to the final, it could be a bit of one-way traffic, and it just did have that feel about it, I'm afraid, in this one, with Marwan quickly winning the first, but after that not really able to impose his game on Greg. And great Super Series victory for Greg. He's probably looking to get a few more of these later on in his career, but you couldn't see Greg retiring anytime soon, the way he's moving and how strong he is, and very little injuries. So it's interesting to see these guys who are 30 years plus being able to kind of battle on as good as they are.
Yeah, a real fantastic performance. And we've talked in the past about sort of Greg's psychology when he gets to these big games. Does he let his head drop when he goes one love down? And we saw it a lot early on in his career, when even when he took a lead, he would get frustrated. I remember that British Open final, World Championship final against Nick Matthew, that he lost from having the lead. But more recently, we've said it in the past, that he just seems much calmer, with just a level head the whole time. And it was really evident in this game. He just got his head down. He played through losing the first game, fought in the second, and then third and fourth came easily. You put in the work early on, and eventually break your opponent.
Yeah, I think he's able to handle his emotions better. I still think you could hear by the commentators and looking at Renan, his coach, that they were still having to keep him in check. There were still little moments with Roy Ginjal, the referee, where I don't think they're the best of friends, those two. I think Greg feels like pretty much a lot is against him when those decisions are being made. But yeah, I think Greg was able to kind of bottle it up and use it in a positive way. Maybe it's those amazing celebrations he started to come up with that's his outpouring of emotion, rather than focusing on the negative calls. He's letting that chin jut go out and the world class hip thrusts.
Yeah, I think he's got to be careful not to get a conduct warning for poking someone's eye out with that chin, because it rears its head quite a bit in the matches these days.
Just a great description from Joey there. I think when Greg won that second against Borka, I think he said, Greg better watch out not to go into a full body spasm, because he was just so excited. I was chuckling away there. So yeah, hats off to Joey. That's a good shot, that one.
Yeah, definitely a great way to celebrate when you're winning, but maybe do it at the end of the match. So we'll jump over to the women's draw, and not as many upsets throughout, but I think we've come to expect that with many of the tournaments these days, and we did have a very strong draw throughout. So effectively, only real upsets were in the first round, and we saw Joel King going down to the Canadian Sam Cornett 3-1. Got a chance to play with Sam before Christmas, and she was telling me how she was looking to get back into the top 50. She's managed to do that now, so hopefully, she's been named PSA Player of the Month, Women's Player of the Month as well, after her run in this tournament.
You mean after her time on court with you, Rob?
Absolutely, mate. We also saw Tesni Evans from Wales taking out Nour El Tayeb. It's just a break in seedings. I think anything can happen in the first round these days. We didn't see many other upsets. Former world number 2 Jenny Duncalf dropping to Renima Oleli. All these things we kind of expect from the seedings in the women's play this time.
Yeah, credit to Tesni. I think she's just found a bit of an upturn in her form recently. I think she got voted, I think it was Young PSA Player of the Year. I saw something that she's got some sort of award, and yeah, you can almost see that it's well deserved, and she's broken to the top 20, so credit to her. And just one other upset in that first round, the USA player Olivia Blatchford beating Joshna, the Indian girl who was seeded 12, in pretty convincing 31 minutes. I know Olivia's living up in Scotland. Her boyfriend's Alan Klein, so I think they've been doing quite a bit of work together, and you can kind of see it's coming into a game. And Olivia really pushed Amanda Sobey in the next round. Like I don't think she's ever beaten her, but was really kind of showing her form.
Yeah, that second round showing a tough 3-1 with Amanda taking it in 41 minutes, but we saw 14-12 to Olivia in the second game and 12-10 to Amanda in the third. We see throughout the second round that every match effectively went with seedings. No real special upsets, but some great performances throughout as well. Laura Mazzaro taking out Sam Cornett, ending her run 3-love. When we move to the quarterfinals, unfortunately, again, it does go with seedings, but a little bit more entertainment throughout. Alison Waters and Camille Serm taking 51 minutes. 2 of those games going to 2 points clear at the end. Camille on a real run throughout recent tournaments.
Yeah, Camille really looking the part at the moment, and credit to Alison to kind of stem the flow a little bit. Obviously didn't win the match, but was able to kind of put up a good battle there. And yeah, like moving into that semi-final with Nour El Shibini versus Camille Serme. Just back one step there. So Nour El Shibini beating Nicol David 3-1, relatively convincing. And yeah, it's kind of like almost sad to kind of see really when you see Nicol David lose now. It's not as much of a surprise that it used to be, say, a year ago. Yeah, she wasn't seeded as high, but yeah, it's kind of a little bit more expected now. But I'm sure Nicol is doing what she needs to do and will come back fighting as good as she can. And yeah, I thought, with Camille's recent form and confidence, I thought, yeah, she could have got maybe a little bit closer to Nour El Shibini, maybe taking it to 5. But yeah, Nora, looking dominant in that match, winning it in 46 minutes.
Yeah, Camille took the first game, and I said when I posted the highlights up on the Squashcast Facebook page that this could have easily been the final had they not been in the same half of the draw. But yeah, after that first game, Camille didn't really push Nour as much as we could have expected, losing 11-3, 11-6, 11-4, which is a shame for her, but obviously it sets up Nour El Shibini, world number 1, world champion, up into the final. In the other semi-final, we had Raneem El Walili versus Nouran Gohar, 2 Egyptians again. A great tough 3-2 for Raneem, and I really enjoyed both women's matches in the semi-finals, and this one especially.
Yeah, listen, 11-9 in the fifth, well, that's a toss of a coin at that point. Great for Raneem, the slightly older, mature, more experienced player than Nouran. Nouran Gohar, big fan of how she's playing. We discussed her previously on the Squashcast, talking about she feels like, or felt like, when Mohammed Al Shabagi burst onto the scene in the men's, that's what Nouran felt like. The big hard hitter, really aggressive player. But yeah, she's lost a few matches, not early on necessarily, but lost a few matches to lower seeds than her. So be interesting to see how she gathers herself and is able to maybe make an impact, maybe as much as she did at the start of the season. So yeah, good final setup between Nour El Shibini and Raneem El Walili, which Raneem came through. You would have looked at that and gone, okay, well, Raneem, the 3 seed, had a pretty tough match in the semis, a 62-minute. Maybe she just wasn't able to do it. But after losing the first game 10-12, she was able to kind of get herself back in it and pretty much win 11-7, 11-7, 11-7 the remaining 3 and 42 minutes. So credit to her for being the Windy City Open champion 2017.
Yeah, she showed great consistency in the last three games of that match, with a superb short game throughout that she's shown throughout her career as well, but really brought her A game for this one. So moving on, we've got a few tournaments coming up, with Canary Wharf starting on the 6th of March, so that's next week for us. This one's one of the ones that I've been able to get to the most in terms of viewing the tournament, certainly not playing in it. We've got quite a few of the top seeds. You just picked out for me Simon Rosner versus Paul Cole first round.
Yeah, again, maybe both players a bit gutted by that one. I think people are trying to avoid probably Paul Cole, because part of these tournaments at the moment would be based on his slightly lower ranking position. So I think once his current ranking gets taken into account, he'll be seated obviously a bit higher and probably avoiding those big clashes early on. So that'll be really interesting to see. Yeah, it's really nice. A compatriot of mine, Phil Rushworth, runs the qualifying draw over at Wimbledon Rackets Club, and yeah, I was lucky enough to play in that a few times, and he does a great job of it. And yeah, eventually if you qualify, you get the luxury of going over to the glass courts itself. I quite like how they've done the wildcard challenge. They've done it every year here, where they kind of pick 2 young English players, and they basically have a one-off match to see who gets the wild card. And yeah, this year it's between Josh Masters and Nathan Lake. Yeah, we've spoken about Nathan Lake before on the Squashcast, a local player as in for Surrey Sports Park. So we wish him all the best to kind of go into that tournament. And just one other little thing to note, Omar Mossad's pulled out, the number 3 seed, and maybe that had a bit of a bearing on what we talked about in the Windy City Open. He did lose 3-love to James, and he might have been injured at that point. So yeah, we wish him a speedy recovery to get back into that one. Just moving on to the next big thing on the calendar, the Wimbledon of squash, the Alum British Open 2017 up in Hull. I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe this might be the last time that Dr. Alam is sponsoring it. I think this is the end of his sponsorship deal with it. So, fantastic he came on board and was able to kind of keep this tournament alive, and hopefully there'll be another sponsor in the wings waiting to snap up on it. But kind of this is a tournament that all the players want to win. It is the Wimbledon of squash, and getting your name on that trophy, even though it's not the highest prize money and maybe doesn't hold the biggest amount of points, it's just one of those tournaments that you look back on your career, and if you've won that's something pretty special.
Yeah, in the past it's been a bit hit and miss in terms of whether or not it will actually happen that year. I remember a few years ago Ramy Ashour winning the British Grand Prix and getting it mixed up with the British Open, saying it was such an honour to win this tournament, and being a little incorrect in the tournament I was talking about. For me, living in the south of England, it's a bit of a shame that it's all the way in Hull, because I can't easily get up there. But when it was at the O2 a few years ago, I didn't manage to get tickets, but I always knew that if it was there again, I would definitely try and make it up. And you have it in that very open area in the O2 where you get a lot of people walking by and seeing top level squash being easily displayed for people.
Yeah, they look great in the O2, and hopefully, we'll see what happens in the future of the British Open. But yeah, it'd be great if it comes down south again and see the impact of it down there. And the final tournament coming up, which is a little bit further away, the Al Gouna International from the 7th to the 14th of April over in Egypt. Again, that one tends to throw up some really kind of interesting results because of the conditions and the kind of Egyptian players in their backyard. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. We'll probably try to do a squash cast after Canary Wharf and British Open to kind of do a bit of a summary and give our feedback on it. And just one kind of semi-final thing for me, like a completely shameless plug. We've got something at Surrey Sports Park called the Pro Shootout coming up soon on the 24th of March. Got a couple of pretty good players involved so far: Daryl Selby, Joe Lee, and Nathan Lake, to name but a few. And yeah, very unique event. It's kind of likened to the T20 version of squash, the 2020 cricket game. It's all the rules are quite different. 2 pools of 4 players, and it's basically an exhibition style tournament with quite a bit of prize money on the line. So if anyone's interested, feel free to just get in touch with us. 24th of March down at Surrey Sports Park. It's going to be a great night, lots of music, crowd interaction, and the players love showing off for that one.
Yeah, and I know we have quite a few international fans, so we'll try and get as much footage up on social media. I'm going to bung a GoPro on one of the courts and see what we can get, because these games are nice, fast-paced, quick format that Jesse has come up with.
Yeah, we're actually going to probably film both courts. We're going to have a third camera moving around, so we're actually going to do quite a professional event of it this year, because one of our sponsors is a film company. So yeah, look out for that. We'll be kind of putting it up as much as we can, and for me, it's something that I'm looking to grow a little bit more. I think it's a great format. 2 hours of squash where you get a big crowd. The pros love it because it's not a huge commitment and strain on the body. They can express themselves, and it's just meant to be a hell of a lot of fun, which it kind of has been the last few years. So watch the space for more of them.
Yeah, it's always good fun to watch, and we even get some of the juniors managing to knock about with some of the pros. So we've had a bit of an extended episode this week. Sorry for that if you don't like podcasts over 30 minutes, but that's how it goes. Don't forget, you can follow us on SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes. And if you're running an Android phone and like to listen to your podcast, you've also got Podcast Republic, which is an app that we are now available through. Stay tuned on the Squashcast Facebook page and Twitter account for all the latest from us. We will either see you after Canary Wharf or the British Open at the end of March. But thank you once again for listening, and see you next time.